Alex Debrincat was traded from Ottawa to Detroit on Sunday evening. For today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, Jay and I are going to discuss what that trade means for the rest of the free agent forwards on the market.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins. That is Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets. So Jay, Debrincat finally traded from Ottawa to Detroit this past Sunday. The Red Wings were in, then they were out. Then they came back in, then they were out again, and then they finally were able to make the deal and then signed Debrincat to an extension, 4 years. I believe it was $7.875 million per season, somewhere in that range, just a little bit below $8 million per year. That was after all. Also, the Ducks were in it. The Islanders were rumored to be on it, but Debrincat goes to the Red Wings for a couple of picks, a prospect, and Dominik Kubalik. When you think of that trade and you apply it now to the rest of the free agent market, especially forwards-wise, what do you think it means for the market? Because there are still some decent free agents out there, but they have yet to sign.
Yeah, I think the first guy that I'm looking at to be the next one on the move is Vladimir Tarasenko, because I know Ottawa was very interested in potentially signing him. Obviously, they had to wait until the Debrincat deal was kind of out of the way, so I'm sure we'll see a couple of other things kind of trickling down, but it's a weird free agent class, and it was weird even before all of the quote-unquote big names got moved, to the point where, like, I believe Matt Duchene got bought out, like, June 30th or something, and then immediately jumped to the top of the available free agent list. You know, it was a very weak free agent class. So if I'm a team that, for example, Ottawa needs to replace Debrincat, I know Washington is still looking for kind of a top six winger. The Islanders were rumored to be in on Debrincat as well, so they're probably looking for a top six winger. So, like, if I'm any of those teams, Tarasenko is at the top of the list for me. And then another name that has potential, I think, is Tomas Tatar, who is 32 years old, but had 20 goals this season. If you're looking for someone to put a little bit more scoring in your top six, of the guys that are available, it's Tarasenko, it's Tomas Tatar, and then there's a big drop off after that. Like, there's other guys, like Patrick Kane had 21 goals, but he's kind of a weird non-starter right now. Patrice Bergeron had 27 goals. Again, that's probably not going to happen.
That's just Boston.
He's probably going to retire. So really, if you want goal scoring and you want a free agent, your choices are Vladimir Tarasenko or Tomas Tatar.
I would say that's fair. As you, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah, Patrice Bergeron is basically just Boston or nothing. I'm pretty sure at this point. Kane had the big hip surgery. He didn't look like the same player in New York. He's probably going to sign a cheap deal somewhere to maybe regain some of his value. Let's say maybe August, maybe heading into training camp in September is probably when you're going to see him sign. Jonathan Toews, not really sure what the plan is for him. There's been talk that he could retire. There's been talk that he could play elsewhere this upcoming season. It's definitely not going to be in Chicago, but I do agree. Tarasenko and Tatar are probably the two best options out there. Tarasenko had a great year this past year in St. Louis and New York. Tatar had over 20 goals yet again. He's such a weird player, I think, Jay, just because it seems like he bounces around way too much for a player that can give you 20 to 25 goals a season. He's been healthy scratched in the playoffs, at times. I don't specifically understand why, because I think he's always been a serviceable middle six player. So I think any team who gets him is going to get a steal. Also, I would put Pius Suter in there, another player who can play in your bottom six, can kill penalties, can put him on your second power play unit, good at 5-on-5. His underlines are very strong. He can give you upwards of 12, 15 goals a season, maybe more. Had a good year with the Red Wings this past year. I really like him as well. Those are really the three that jump out at me. You know, there's Max Comtois. I think he'll probably sign at some point down the road. We'll just have to see. But the free agent market right now, it's definitely thinned out, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly. And like another name that I like on this list, Jesse Puljujarvi, I think is going to be available for very cheap because Edmonton basically tanked his value and then left him out to dry. I think that's going to be the big thing now is getting value. The star piece of kind of available wingers, Debrincat, is gone. He's signed. Arguably, then you've got Tarasenko in the next tier. I think he'll probably get maybe not what he's making at the minute. So we've just finished a $7.5 million contract. He's probably not going to get 7.5, but I could see him getting, between 4 and 5 million for the next 4 or 5 years, let's say. And then after that, I think really any of these guys, Tomas Tatar, you can get, I think you could probably pick him up pretty cheap. He made 4.5 last year. Piers Suter, I feel like you can probably get dirt cheap. Max Comtois, you can get cheap. So really it's about, do you want to go out and do you want to get elite, like quote unquote elite scoring in Tarasenko for as long as his age holds out, or do you want to go out and maybe sign a couple of the other guys and get more, bang for your buck, let's say.
I agree. And that Tarasenko contract is going to be really interesting. Remember, he just changed agents. Mm-hmm. He's represented by Pat Brisson and I believe it's JP Barry now, if I recall
Yes,
correctly.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so it looked like he was going to sign in Carolina, fired his agent, and now his new agency with Brisson and JP Barry, they're getting some offers together. You discussed it. There's a rumor with Ottawa. That does make sense as a Debrincat replacement and someone who can provide some scoring. Islanders, I think if they want another scorer, makes sense. You talked about Washington. I think Brian McClellan, their GM, said that they would like to maybe make a trade to improve their scoring in the top 6. Does that include moving Evgeny Kuznetsov out? Because he's always been rumored in trade talks in Washington. So that should be really fascinating to follow throughout this offseason. Are there any other free agents that come to mind forward-wise for you?
Not really. Like I'm looking down the list now, and I think the 5 or 6 that we've mentioned, like Nick Ritchie is potentially interesting as a guy that you get to kind of bolster the middle 6. He adds a little bit of grit to the game. A guy like Paul Stastny, maybe. Again, you're not going to get a ton of offense out of him, but he will solidify that kind of bottom 6. Phil Kessel is currently without a contract. He made 1.5 million last year and has really started to slow down, which, I mean, fair play to Phil Kessel. He's played a million games in a row and has 3 Stanley Cups and has basically nothing to prove to anyone, but he's a guy that you could get for cheap that I think probably a weaker team could plug him in on that middle 6, flip him at the deadline for an asset. So like he's a name that's interesting. But apart from that, like you scroll down the list and I'm like, man, this is just a bunch of guys, I just, I'm scrolling and I'm not seeing anything that like
that's all it is now.
is worth doing a whole lot about, especially if you want scoring.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm curious to see if any of these players, do they have to get PTOs heading into training camp? Some of these, it's weird that I say that because all these players are very established NHLers, but is that what's going to have to be at some point? I'm just not fully sure.
Maybe. I'm sure, was it Wayne Simmons signed a PTO with the Leafs or someone of that kind of era / style of hockey signed a PTO with the Leafs, and I don't remember who it was, but yeah, I think you could very well see something like that of guys that know that they maybe haven't got what it takes anymore, but know that maybe they get into training camp, they show them what they can do. Oh, hey, they sign a contract on the back of that. So that's a really interesting thought. You mentioned Carolina just a little bit ago. And I think next we're going to talk a little bit about Carolina, but we're going to skip over to defensemen because they are still apparently in the Erik Karlsson sweepstakes, we'll say. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. First, though, I've got to tell you all about AG1 because it's so good. I take AG1 every single day. I gave it a try because I was tired of taking like 17 different vitamins every morning. I wanted a single simple solution. I was getting sick a lot. I was tired all the time. And now that I've been taking AG1 for about a couple of years, I feel so much better. I drink it every morning. I'll get up. I'll make coffee. I'll make tea, whatever. I'll make my AG1. I'll drink it. And it's just the perfect way to start your day. Athletes have one thing in common. They take care of their bodies. And a huge part of that starts with optimizing whole body health. A lot of them also drink AG1, and that's why I'm a huge fan. With every daily serving, I'm setting myself up for success with 75 high-quality ingredients that give me key daily nutrients and support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. It is a micro habit that delivers macro benefits and helps just about everybody take great care of their health every day. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1. Get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That is drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out.
And we're back here on the Locked On NHL podcast for Thursday. I am Hunter Hodies with Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets. So, Jay, the Erik Karlsson watch, if you want to call it that, it continues. It's down to the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Carolina Hurricanes. Maybe there's a mystery team or two in there. Who knows? It hasn't been reported by anyone credible, but it seems like it's down to those two teams. And the Sharks are, let's just say, they're slow playing this. It's honestly a game of chicken. Someone's going to have to blink first. One of these three teams, either the Sharks are going to blink and say, hey, we're going to take one of these offers that could be on the table, or one of the Penguins or Hurricanes could be like, okay, we're going to step it up a little bit, improve our offer, and then the Sharks would be like, okay, maybe we'll take this and then we'll get the trade rolling. But so far, none of that has happened. It's a nice little standoff. There's been reports out there that Karlsson prefers the Penguins, which is interesting considering I think that the Hurricanes are more equipped, I would say, to win the Stanley Cup next season. I think they're closer than the Penguins are. When you look at the Karlsson saga, or the situation, I should say, what are your thoughts about it?
It's, yeah, like you say, it's just a massive game of chicken at this point, and someone's going to blink eventually, and I don't know if that's going to be... it feels at the minute like the Sharks are kind of playing the Penguins and Carolina off each other, and like Mike Greer is calling up Kyle Dubas and being like, hey, the Hurricanes said that they'd give me this, this, and this. Will you give me this, 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 plus something else? And then going back to the Hurricanes and being like, hey, Kyle Dubas said that he was going to give me this, 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 and this. What are you going to do? And I wonder if that's going to work, or if what's going to happen is the Hurricanes get bored of waiting. They go and they make that Tony DeAngelo trade that's kind of been on the back burner since basically, I think the plan is the Carolina Hurricanes are going to go for wish.com Erik Karlsson in Tony DeAngelo and just kind of make it work. I don't think the Hurricanes need Erik Karlsson, really. I think they already have a guy that does that in Brent Burns. And, you know, the Sharks won very few things with those two on the same team. He's got a ton of, like, his salary is so high. I forget every time until I'm looking and I'm like, yeah, this dude makes $11.5 million a season. You know, obviously the Sharks are going to retain some. I assume a third team, Arizona or Chicago, will retain some. But yeah, I don't know. I can't figure out if what's going to happen is Carolina's going to back out and the Sharks are basically going to be left with whatever Pittsburgh wants to offer them, or if the Sharks are like, well, neither of you are giving me what I want, so we're just going to keep him, and then they try again at the trade deadline. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I haven't talked to JD Young of Locked On Sharks, noted Erik Karlsson expert, about all of this, but I wouldn't be surprised if both teams fall through and Erik Karlsson is still on the Sharks roster by October, which begs the question: what happens with all of the available free agents that are probably waiting for the Erik Karlsson saga to finish before they decide where they're going, you know?
I would say the trade market as well is probably waiting to see what happens with this deal, because think about, Jay, Noah Hanifin, he hasn't been dealt. Connor Hellebuck is still with Winnipeg, and he's made it abundantly clear that he doesn't want to go through a rebuild. Mark Scheifele is still there. You have a few other players who are also on the trade market. John Gibson is still with the Ducks. We thought he was going to be traded by now. I think a lot of these teams with these players are just waiting to see what happens with this. I thought the Debrincat deal would really kickstart other deals. So far, that hasn't happened. And you bring up an interesting point with the Sharks. That's a dangerous game to play, taking him into the season, because Karlsson has made it clear he doesn't want to play for the Sharks anymore. He wants to win a Stanley Cup before he retires. He goes into the season still as a member of the Sharks. That could turn a bit ugly and also probably a bit awkward, because he's still playing on a team that's not going to be good.
His value is never higher than right now.
Yes.
He just had 100 points as a defenseman. He's not going to do that again this year. What if he goes into next season, gets hurt? Well, there goes any kind of trade. You know, like you say, it's a very it's a risky game that every single party is playing, and I'm not sure if there are going to be any winners here. It's tough to say.
And the funny thing about that is his value is definitely at an all-time high, but because I don't think the Sharks have a lot of leverage, I don't think they're going to be getting this ridiculous return back from either Carolina, Pittsburgh, or a mystery team comes in, especially from the Penguins case. You would have to unload Jeff Petrie in some capacity because you're not going to have Chris Letang, Erik Karlsson, and Jeff Petrie on your right side. Two of those guys make over $6 million per. Karlsson's not going to make 11, but he's still probably going to be in what? The 7 million range, maybe the 8 million range. That's 22 million tied up into 3 defensemen on your right side. That's not going to happen. Mikael Granlund, that's another contract that I think they would want to get out of. You have picks, obviously, which is good, but prospects, they don't have much. Carolina, though, they have the prospects. They have the picks. They also have probably better roster players to give up in a deal with the Sharks. There's also the thing with the Hurricanes where can Burns and Karlsson coexist? Because there's all these rumors out there that in San Jose, it wasn't a good match when both of them were on the ice.
It's because neither of them know how to play defense. It's basically like having 5 forwards on the ice. They're both incredible talents, but if they trade for Karlsson, he immediately, in my mind, becomes your top pairing defenseman. You put Brent Burns on the second pairing. But yeah, like you say, I know Jack Drury is probably on the way out of Carolina. Brett Pesce probably goes in a trade. And then I think it really depends on like how much salary can you convince the Sharks to keep? Are the Sharks going to be competitive next season? No, probably not. So they can probably afford to take some contracts like the Mikael Granlund contract, you know? So I wonder if the conversation is not necessarily how much do you want to give up, but how much are the Sharks willing to take back? You know, is it, for example, do you give the Sharks like a first and a second and Jeff Petrie and Mikael Granlund for Erik Karlsson and a prospect? You know, that feels like that's probably where it's going to be.
I think so as well. I've seen a rumor or report out there that the Penguins may have offered 2 firsts on the table. I'm sorry. I don't think that's going to happen, even though Erik Karlsson just had a 100-point season. And yes, he is definitely worth 2 first-round picks in a normal situation. There's not many suitors for him. So when the team that's trading him doesn't have the leverage, they're probably not going to get 2 first-round picks. What you're probably going to see in the situation is a return that's going to make a lot of people be like, whoa, that's it for someone who just had 100 points. And from a Penguins perspective, they would basically have 4 forwards out there at a time when Karlsson is out there. They would probably pair him with someone like Ryan Graves or Marcus Pettersson. You can do, excuse me, either one. But this will be an interesting one to follow in the coming days/weeks. I'm not really sure when this is going to be done because San Jose wants to be patient, but it's something to say the least.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, similar to the forward that we just talked about, like the Karlsson deal will go through, and then the DeAngelo trade will probably land, depending on where Karlsson goes. And then after that, you're like, right, okay. If you didn't get Karlsson or DeAngelo, Matt Dumba is still available. A guy like Ethan Bear is a UFA somehow, because even though he was, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd best Canucks defenseman behind like Quinn Hughes this season, somehow the Canucks were like, nah, we don't want to pay that guy anymore. You know? So I wonder, do you then go and pick up people like that? Caleb Jones is available. He had a rough season on a very bad Chicago team, but I feel like he's probably still has value there. There's a lot of options. And again, it's going to be how much do you want Karlsson versus how much do you want to just kind of have a little bit more offense from the back end, you know? So I wouldn't be surprised if Karlsson goes to Pittsburgh, the Hurricanes pull the trigger on the DeAngelo trade, and then maybe the Hurricanes pick up another one of those guys and hope that one of those guys plus DeAngelo is about as good as Karlsson. But it's tough to say. And
they also have the Brett Pesce situation to deal with because he has 1 more year left on his contract. There's been reports that they may be looking to trade him this offseason because they can't come close to an extension. The Sabres have been out there looking at him. I'm sure, honestly, half the league will probably be in on Brett Pesce because he's one of the more
Brett Pesce is one of the more underrated players in this league, I feel like.
Absolutely. He's one of the most underrated defensemen, I think, in the league. But that's where the Karlsson saga stands right now. Coming up in the final segment, Jay and I are going to get into some hot takes, who we have as a cup winner right now heading into the season versus who a couple lottery teams are for next season, at least on July 13th. A lot of things can change, but we're going to dive into that right after this. Before we discuss that, though, we do have to get into Birddogs. They make you look really good. They stretch khaki shorts, and they are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. They do the same exact thing as Ulamon, but fit way, way better. And they also fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. They use anti-stink, sweat, wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. For me personally, I love wearing Birddogs. They are super comfortable. You can wear them multiple times a week. And the best part is they don't stink after a couple of times. You really only have to wash them maybe once or twice a month. To be honest, they are that good. Right now, if you want to get your hands on some, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you that. All right, we're back here on the Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins. That is Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets. Jay, give me your cup winner heading into the season right now and your lottery winner. And yes, I am sure this is going to make some people mad.
People are going to get real mad. So we talked about this a little bit off mic, and I was like, do I go with like the realistic or do I go with like the hot take? And I think what I'm going to do is go for a realistic cup winner. And this is obviously dependent on a couple of things, but I think I have either a good feeling or a bad feeling about the Carolina Hurricanes, depending on where you are. And I was like, do I pick them or do I go for the wild card of, I think, the Dallas Stars, if they can get past Vegas or Edmonton again this year? I've got a good feeling about them, or a bad feeling if you're me and you hate the Dallas Stars for reasons unknown. But those are my kind of two options for cup winner. In terms of lottery winner, again, there's easy ones to say there. I'm gonna go out of the box here. I think the St. Louis Blues are going to be quite bad this season, and I think they're probably going to be in the mix for the lottery.
Well, that man, Blues fans are not going to be happy.
Okay, listen, it's not personal, I promise. This is just, I was looking at the list and I was like, man, you don't have Tarasenko anymore. You don't have Ryan O'Reilly anymore. There goes all of your offense. They've still got Jordan Kyrou, I believe, who's still quite good, but it's looking a little bare for the Blues right now.
They got Kevin Hayes this offseason, but outside of that, they really haven't done too much. They have to obviously, the Torrey Krug.
God, I thought that you were going to be like, hey, they might be good. They've got Kevin Hayes now. I love Kevin Hayes, but listen.
Hayes is great. Kyrou's awesome. Robert Thomas is obviously great. Curious to see what happens with Torrey Krug, because they tried to trade him to the Flyers and he declined it. So that's obviously something
fair, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair because the Flyers are probably going to be bad. Stay tuned for that coming up in just a second, by the way. My cup winner right now, man, I'm a big believer in the New Jersey Devils going into this season, Jay.
I know this, and I still hate it.
I know. They are loaded. Forward-wise, their cap situation is tremendous. They still have over $5 million in cap space, despite having all of their players locked up. Jack Hughes is locked up for a while. Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier, all those guys, plus Andre Palat. Their forward depth is absolutely unreal. Dougie Hamilton makes the most money per year at $9 million, and they still have all this cap space. Seeking Fowler is good. John Marino on the back end. Akira Schmidt is here, and he's ready. They still have room to go out and get a Connor Hellebuyck if they wanted to. They have the picks, the prospects, and the players to do that deal if they want to. And even though Lindy Ruff is the head coach, I don't think much of him. This team is that good, and I think they're the favorite to win the Metropolitan Division heading into next season. I have them as a big cup contender, and I honestly could very much see them winning the cup right now. In terms of a lottery winner, I'm going to say right now the Philadelphia Flyers are going to stink. That team is going to be bad, and everyone should know that too. They have put it out there that they are going to be bad, and they are doing this the hard. Well, I wouldn't even say the hard way. They're doing this the right way. To be honest, they're actually embracing a rebuild, which is what the Flyers never do. Danny Briere has publicly said it that yes, this is going to take a little bit of time, but we are going to do this right. I don't think you've seen the last of trades from the Flyers this offseason. They could trade Sanheim. They could trade Carter Hart. Maybe Travis Konecny if the right deal comes along. There's also Scott Laughton. He hasn't been dealt yet, but he's been in trade rumors. I think you're going to see a much different looking Flyers team heading into the season. And this is a team that is designed to be bad. I think there's a really good chance that they get the number 1 pick this upcoming season, even though that really never happens in Philly. Another lottery winner, and I'll probably throw another cup winner in there as well. Another lottery winner, the Montreal Canadiens. That team's not going to be good either. I'm sorry. I love Nick Suzuki. I love Cole Caulfield. I love Mike Matheson on their back end, but they don't have the goalies. Their forward depth is not that good. Defensively, it's a little bit of a mess. They're doing it the right way as well. They're rebuilding, but I don't have them as a good team heading into this upcoming season. I think right now they're going to be really bad, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do win the lottery. Another cup winner, just to finish that off, the Dallas Stars. This team, they showed why they were so good this past season. That's going to continue into next season. Jason Robertson had an unreal year. Rupe Hintz, Miro Heiskanen is one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. Jake Ottinger, pure superstar, number 1 goaltender. Jamie Benn is still kicking. Tyler Seguin is still really good. Their forward depth is a really nice mix of some younger players and some older players. I didn't even mention Joe Pavelski, who
the ageless wonder, Joe Pavelski, like
unreal player at almost 40 years of age, and I like their back end as well. So I have them as also a potential cup winner heading into this season. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Stanley Cup final is New Jersey versus Dallas.
That would be, that would be a really, like, objectively speaking, that would be terrible for me, but it would be such good hockey is the thing. And, like, I feel like the Dallas Stars came out of nowhere a couple of seasons ago. Like, they've always been pretty good. But my experience of watching them has always been like, wow, they don't play very fun hockey. This season, I was watching them. I really only watched them twice this year because when they were playing the Blue Jackets, they're so fun. Their transition game, unreal. Their rush game, unreal. And it's the same thing with New Jersey. A very fun style. I think it's going to be a red team versus a green team for the Stanley Cup final, I think. Whether that's Carolina finally avoiding the sweep in the third round, or if it's New Jersey kind of doing I don't know. The only thing, New Jersey's still very young. And I don't think that age is necessarily dependent on succeeding in the Stanley Cup finals. I think they will take a step forward this season. I think maybe they'll win 2 rounds. Maybe they'll win 3. I don't know that they are quite good enough to win the cup, which is something we kind of saw this year with Florida, of this is still a young team still putting it together versus a team like Vegas, who are somehow like, I don't know. I know that Vegas has only been around for like 8 years or so, but it feels like that's a team full of veterans that have played together for quite a while. Florida's still putting things together. I think Florida should be amazed with what they achieved this season. And I think if New Jersey hits that level of Florida making the cup final next season, I think that should be an absolute win. I think they're very good. I think they're going to be the team to beat in the Metro. I'm not sure they have the longevity to win a Stanley Cup just yet. But hey, next year, the year after, I think teams should watch out.
They're going to be really good for a long time. Mm-hmm. I think that's the
as much as I hate to admit it, New Jersey is going to be good for a very long time. Unless something horrible happens, they are set. They've got all of their big pieces signed. You know, we talked about that last week when we talked about free agency and how they've done basically nothing except re-sign guys. You know, I don't even know that you mentioned Timo Meier re-signing with them when you were going through the contracts earlier. They're set for life. They could do with another defenseman signed long-term. Probably they could do with a veteran goalie just in case of Vanacek or Schmidt falling off a cliff. It happens. We've seen it before with young goalies. But yeah, New Jersey, man. I hate how good they are, and I hate how fun they are to watch. Makes me angry.
It's not. These are not your childhood New Jersey Devils.
This is not the This is not the Martin Brodeur trap New Jersey Devils.
No, not the ones that make you. I would rather watch my water boil when I make pasta than watch the New Jersey Devils play hockey. That is not them anymore. But Jay, unless you have anything else, I think that will do it for this edition of the Locked On NHL podcast for Thursday. Really appreciate all of you taking the time to listen/watch this episode on YouTube. We'll have another episode of the show on Friday when Rachel of Locked On Flyers and Gil of Locked On Islanders will be the hosts of that edition. So thank you all so much for tuning into this one. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back with another episode of the Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast next week.